Kelli and Robert. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
As everybody in this room knows, a key to the future of food is food security, but that doesn't just mean handing out food to people in need. Lasting solutions require serious engagement with the communities that are being served. Kelli, in your work with IFAI, you've encountered some specific needs of Indigenous people when it comes to food security. Could you tell us about that and what that looks like on the ground?
Absolutely, and 10 points for getting the acronym right on the first try. Let's start with some background, right? 28% of Native households in the US are food insecure, as per the end of July GAO report that I last read. And that's compared to 13% of national households. Now that's due to a myriad of reasons, not least the centuries of federal Indian policy, and I won't give you all of that. I couldn't do it in 10 minutes, maybe 15, but definitely not 10. But the high points are this series of policies that are focused on separating us Native citizens from our land, our resources, our food, our traditions, our culture from each other, right? Traditionally, historically, food policy has been made about us and for us, but not necessarily by tribes, tribal citizens. We see a huge shift in that as we work today. So all of those things together, food policies that are flexible and driven by tribes are often far more successful, right? Tribes are sovereign nations. They've been here since time immemorial. We've been feeding our folks since time immemorial. We know how to do it. There are 570 plus tribes, right? So there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. Finding those opportunities for flexibility and specificity that are tribally driven are always more successful. IFAI gets to be the subject matter experts supporting tribes, tribal producers, tribal governments in their work to do that.
Could you tell us a bit about programs, specific programs that have worked and those that haven't?
Yes, okay, I can point to, in the 7.5 minutes, tribally specific programs are things like ones where tribes have control of what they get to do and how they get to feed their people. I've gotten to see examples of tribally driven solutions that are revitalizing community gardens that include traditional plants, but they're planted on the health care facilities landscape, and they have raised beds so their elders don't have to bend down to get to stuff. And guess what? While their elders are there, their daycare is getting to come over and interact with their elders on this traditional plant. So we have these very specific tribal-driven solutions, but that is absolutely recreatable for other tribes, right? Maybe that's not your traditional food, maybe that's not how your healthcare facility is set up, but you have elders and you have daycare and you have traditional foods that you want to reconnect. All are options for how you want to do it for your own folks.
Great. Robert, how does Feeding America approach such a complex task of improving food security in Indigenous communities?
Great, thanks, Yasmin. And good afternoon, or morning. I'm glad to be here. So Feeding America, our vision is an America without hunger. And to do that, we work with a network of 200 food banks, 60,000 partner and faith-based agencies, soup kitchens, food pantries, things like that, and 21 statewide food bank associations. So in order to understand how to address food insecurity, we think it's best to ask people who are facing food insecurity, who are the experts on that. So we just in September released our third annual report called Insights, an Insights report that asked a representative sample of individuals who currently or formerly were facing food insecurity, what they need to thrive. I won't share all of that with you. You can check it out at feedingamerica.org/elevating voices. But I want to target a couple of themes that they'll help get to this point. Four major themes jumped out. Prioritizing dignity, expanding opportunity, improving health, and increasing access. I'll focus on two of those. First, around improving health. Neighbors agreed. Neighbors is what we call those individuals who we work with. They agree that eating healthy food that adheres to cultural and other preferences helps support strong physical and mental health, especially among children. They are very aware of the impact of food insecurity on physical health, diabetes, and heart disease in their communities, and on mental health like anxiety and depression. But here's an important statistic I think is worth sharing. 71% of those individuals surveyed said they want to eat healthier, but they cannot afford to do so. Right? The foundation of so much that we'll talk about today and that underpins the health of this country is around making sure people have access to the healthy food that they know they need and they say they need to thrive. And the other point I want to highlight quickly is prioritizing dignity. Neighbors know what best foods will meet their household needs and cultural preferences. 84% of those surveyed said it's important that anti-hunger policies support people's dignity and choices in what they feed their families. They do not want to see restrictions. They want to have the resources to purchase the food they know they need. So those are under the process that we go through to address food security, and whether that's in Native communities or in all communities, is by going to individuals and asking what they need. And as part of our survey, that does include many of our Native partners and Native communities. We have a director of Native and tribal partnerships that's on our staff that has helped deepen our relationships with groups like IFAI through our network food banks to partner with those tribes and tribal communities in their areas to figure out what works best, right? If it's providing resources or support around community farming programs, we will help make that connection. If it's working on large federal nutrition programs, commodity-based programs, many of which are in one particular, the food distribution program on Indian reservations, there's some that are designed specifically to target those communities. We'll work with that as well.
Sure, and Kelli, I know that IFAI, nailed it. I know that IFAI and Feeding America recently collaborated. Could you tell us about that initiative?
We can sure try. And poor Mark, who answers his phone on his day off every time I call him, was the start of this particular collaboration, yes. Recently, there was a rare house disruption when it comes specifically to the food distribution program on Indian reservations. FDIPR for the cool kids, you can all count yourself as cool kids now, and we'll save some time. So in this FDIPR program, food is shipped from USDA warehouses to locations. We call them Indian Tribal Organizations, or ITOs. These shipments were disrupted, right? And it was months and months. We're barely getting back to where and this started in, May is when this started happening. And so, huge logistics issue, right? And you think logistics issue, we can fix that. But what the result was people going hungry in these communities who depend on these resources, who depend on this food, which, by the way, is healthier and more culturally appropriate than a lot of other things they have access to. There's traditional foods in this package they may not be able to get other places. Culturally relevant foods, fresh produce in a place like Alaska where it might be really expensive or difficult to get fresh produce. These deliveries were disrupted, people were going hungry, right? And there's not a fast solution in policy all the time. But what there is a fast solution is, and with organizations who know what they're doing and know their communities and can act really quickly to get food to those folks who are hungry. And that's where we got to work together on those things.
Yeah, so in this case, Feeding America, again, our network food banks have the reach to cover the entire country, right? And that certainly includes Indian country as well. So as we started hearing about this in partnership with IFAI, with tribal partners, and then eventually starting to hear from our network food banks, there's a senior commodity program that was also impacted by this. We stand ready to support in times of disaster, whether that's natural disaster, maybe man-made disaster. So we were there. So yes, poor Mark answered the phone calls whenever needed, and kicked into gear, right? Making those connections locally. A lot of times, again, we want to feed people today, right? We know they need today. We will work together, and we are working together. I think we'll end on a question on this of long-term solutions. But we wanted to make sure that tribal partners had connections to their local food banks. Is it a temporary need? Were there certain resources that we can connect to make sure that they had the resources throughout the disruption?
Right. Well, we've got 1 minute to address the big question. We've talked about addressing acute shortages, acute needs, but we want to talk long-term as well. What are the most important sort of policy-based efforts geared toward addressing food insecurity?
We won't get to them all, but I'll point you towards the research. For some light reading later, the Native Farm Bill Coalition, nativefarmbill.com, has produced something called the Gaining Ground Report, which has over 150, I will not quiz you on them, priorities from Indian country around the Farm Bill. For those of you interested in nutrition, Control Find is your friend. You're looking for Title IV.
Great, and I'll pick up on that. So the Farm Bill. I'm sure you have heard about, we'll hear about that, and while we only have a minute to cover a 4+ year process that's still in the works, it is a critical opportunity to make the permanent investments that we think and that tribal leaders and neighbors of ours tell us they need. Quick resource for us, feedingamericaaction.org/Farm Bill can look at some of our priorities. it gets very specific, but I'll highlight a couple. One, listening to tribal partners. Looking for tribal parity, did I get that right? Across programs, making sure that tribal communities can run the programs to do so in a way that will work for them. Big programs I know have come up already and will again. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, the foundation for our country's commitment to addressing food insecurity, needs to remain strong. Benefits need to remain strong. Resources that people tell us they need should be there, while protecting their ability to choose what foods are right for them. And other commodity programs, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP, the Tribal Commodity Program, all of those are a win-win. It helps farmers, it helps the whole food supply chain while addressing food insecurity in this country.
Great, thank you so much. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks for being here.
Please welcome Patricia